Hola, ¿cómo estás, señor Opex? Mira. Alright, I'm going to explain to you some things today. How about that? Opex here. So I'm going to explain what I'm hearing on the news, on mainstream news, mainstream media, and then I'm also going to explain what I hear on alternative media, and I'm going to have my views on it. This is discussing, wait for it, climate change. Yep, it's going to be that. So, let's get into what I'm hearing. Let's start with climate change through the mainstream media. Mainstream media is saying that, well, global warming 20 years ago, and then they realized that it wasn't freaking warming, and they switched the name. So global warming, let's start there. Global warming is something that was created, the thought was created that everything's warming up, and a lot of it had to do with the CO2 emissions. And people believe that it was man-made, blah, blah, blah. And we're warming the atmosphere, which is creating climate change, making the ice caps melt, and so on and so forth. So, the mainstream wanted you to believe, through the elite, that this is happening. And, well, there was a little bit of science behind it, but that's about it. And the only little bit of science was that a fraction of a degree, Alaska was hotter than the year before, on average. Dude, come on. Seriously? Come on. You take all the days out of the year and average them together, it's not going to be the exact same average to the 0.001 of a degree that it was the year before. I mean, you could have had a colder winter this year and a colder summer, and then a warmer summer next year and a warmer winter. It fucking fluctuates. So, the mainstream wanted you to believe the ice caps are melting, the polar bears have nowhere to live. Let me get into that real quick. The polar bears, they're telling you the population is going to decrease and blah, blah, blah. We have more polar bears today in northern Alaska and Canada than ever before. The populations are like fivefold from just, I'm trying to remember, 10, 15 years ago. There's 5 times the population. These are hunters. These polar bears are, yeah, they're migrating and stuff, and they're becoming more in numbers. They're moving more into Canada, like farther south, and they're actually going to war with grizzlies at this point. Now, of course, you might look at a grizzly and be like, that's a beast, right? Polar bears are even bigger and scarier. Polar bears are huge. Polar bears feed on seals and walruses and even occasionally, get this one, whales, orcas, smaller obviously. They'll go into the water and snatch up whatever they can find, whatever big monster that they can find. That's what polar bears do. I think they're okay. They are known. Research just came out. I think I even saw it on InfoWars today because I had a little bit of downtime, and I actually looked at what Alex Jones was talking about on climate change, and that's actually one of the initial reasons I'm making this video. Of course, I wanted to make it anyways, but I thought of, why not? So he is alternative media, and he was saying that, the article suggested that polar bears can swim a lot more than we thought before. The prior understanding of polar bears said that they could swim up to 300 miles at a time. 300 miles they can swim. And then they came out with a new fact today that they can go over 400 miles. 420 or 430 miles they can swim. Can you imagine that? That's a long time to swim. I can't even fathom. Polar bear just for weeks on end or whatever, however long it takes. I think they're fine. I think we got to stop worrying about the polar bears. Their population's higher than ever, and they can eat pretty much anything they want. They have like nothing that can, fight back on them. I mean, in Canada, they'll take down the grizzlies. Up north, they'll take down freaking up to whales, dude. And walruses and shit. I think they're okay. I think they're the least of our worries, right? So, well, maybe more to our worry if they keep migrating down south, but I believe there's just so much of a population that they're just expanding, But I just wanted to get that out there that if you're worried about climate change because you've seen a picture of a polar bear on a small ice cap, that's because he was basically just posing. He just wanted to get out of the water. He's okay. He can swim a long fucking time, man. He's okay. There ain't no freaking great whites up there going after polar bears. There ain't. Not up north. So I think he's okay. Alright, so getting that out of the way, global warming ended up becoming climate change, did it not? Once they realized the Earth is actually not heating up anymore, it was progressively heating up, and now it's cooling. So, this week, up in the north of the United States, and obviously Canada, had some really cold, devastating weather. I was in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, and the high that day was 24 degrees, and this was 3 days ago. And up in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, actually all Wisconsin and Illinois, was freezing. It was snowing. It was freezing rain. It was windy as hell. And it was just like a winter snowstorm in February. But it's April now. So people are speculating in the mainstream news, even in alternative news, that there's something weird going on that it would happen this way. Me personally, I don't think it's all that weird, especially when I know the concepts of reason. There's a lot of reason for that to happen. So let's think about this. It's really cold up north, and the jet stream went down to the south from the north, which is not unheard of. I mean, that's how we got those polar storms. What are they called? The Arctic storms. Anyways, the jet streams went south, and it froze up a lot of the south of like the Arctic. And the Caribbean, specifically the U.S. Virgin Islands, actually saw snow. So, in your lifetime, have you ever heard of the Caribbeans ever having snow? Not in my lifetime. Maybe not in your grandma's lifetime. Maybe not in her grandma's lifetime. But it's not like it can't happen. I guess there was research saying that 400 years ago, the Caribbean actually hit snow at one day. It's not unheard of that it possibly could happen. So it happened. I even seen a few years ago that like the Giza pyramids were covered in snow. I seen the picture. I mean, a light, tiny blanket of snow. Almost like a tiny sheet of snow. And it can happen. It can get cold some years, it can get warm some years. It can get cold some days, it can get warm some days. It happens. You live on a whole planet here. You just can't live in Florida and expect it to be hot every fucking day. Eventually it's going to have to cool. Unless you're exactly at the equator or something. And you really can't expect snow, you know what I mean? But with that being said, you're knowing that the winds went south from the north. What happened in the south? No one's talking about it. I actually looked up the other day, maybe 3 or 4 days ago, something about Antarctica, because I had a thought process on Antarctica. And when I looked it up, the very, very Google search result, the very first one, said that Antarctica on March 28th, 2016, hit its hottest temperature of all time. Recorded temperature of all time. And it was 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Yep, you heard that right. You were colder in Georgia that day than Antarctica. Yeah, you heard it right. 65 degrees in Antarctica. Wow. Talk about everything fucking melting, right? So, when the jet streams went down up north, what was going on? Was everything going down south? Where then the south would have to go up around? What happened in the rest of the world? Was there a shift? Was there something weird going down? Was it geoengineering? Was it by conscious design to make this happen? Or was it just nature being nature? Let's try to figure this one out. I gave you a bunch of information, and I would like for you to comment me below what your thoughts are. What do you think happened the last week? I mean, it's unusually cold right now in Georgia. 63 degrees right now in Georgia. Just unusual. It's not crazy unusual, but 2-3 weeks ago, it was 90 every day. And now it's 63. So what's going on with the temperature here? If you're familiar with geoengineering, I want to discuss a little bit about that and my thoughts on geoengineering. Is it real? Is it false? Personally, I do believe in geoengineering. I believe it's a very real concept, and there's a lot of science and proof behind it. And I can just give you a few theories that can back me up. And that understanding that it's beyond a possibility, that it's 100% doable. So, let's get with it. Geoengineering. The days that led up to about a week ago when the cold just really hit us up north in United States. When the cold hit us, about 5 days before, I started seeing unusual amount of chemtrails. Like today, there is no chemtrails. You can still see like the haze in the sky and stuff, like the chemicals in the haze. But you don't see any planes producing chemtrails. I see a bunch of contrails, but I don't see any chemtrails today. So, all those chemtrails that I saw, those days that led up to that cold, which I'm going to explain what I've seen before in a second, but those chemtrails started filling up the sky. And when all that chemical haze started to come together, there is a technology out there with high frequencies, radio frequencies, that you can use to latch onto those compounds that were thrown into the sky. And when you take you zap, what is it, the ionosphere? I'll just say atmosphere, because when you zap the fucking chemtrails, you can move them into the direction that you want to move them. You can't just do that with oxygen and hydrogen and nitrogen and all the normal compounds. You need to put something that's almost like heavy metals, like aluminum, barium, things of that nature. And when you zap it and you can move it, you can move the weather. You can create winds, you can create famines, you can create droughts, you can create rain, you can create all types of weather. You can move the Arctic down south, you can move down south weather up north, you can make it rain in fucking California. I ain't talking about dollar bill, y'all. So when you can do that, it's possible. Is that a possibility for last week's scenario, where Antarctica was the warmest it's ever been, and, well, the North, like United States, is pretty fucking cold, and we had some devastating winds and weather. So, what's your thought on that? Is geoengineering the culprit for mass climate change? 2, let's get into this one. This one's an obvious one. Is it just the weather? Weather changes all the time. You can't predict the weather. You can't predict the weather. You cannot do it. It's impossible. You have a better chance of predicting the next, whatever, you know, the next star that explodes in the sky than predicting the weather. It's about that same characteristics. Yeah, you can probably predict the weather for hours beforehand, but you can't predict the weather in entirety or in general. You can't do it. But we have weathermen and meteorologists, and they have all this technology, and technology is all valid and it's all good. Bullshit. Bullshit. I don't believe in that shit. I believe that helps you predict the weather better, but I don't believe for 1 second that you can still predict the weather. I can't see it. Haven't heard a meteorologist tell me this, that they can predict the weather. They'll tell you straight up, it's a freaking gamble. Is it going to be 70 today, or is it going to be 55? Well, where that wind's coming from, it's 70, but where it ends up is going to be 55. You're not going to figure that shit out. You can be a genius, you're not figuring that shit out. Albert Einstein couldn't predict the weather. I'm telling you right now. The weather itself is unpredictable. It can shift at any time. It's something that's out of our hands in terms of figuring it out. Is it just the weather being the weather? Is it just being its normal path? Is just certain things that go on the planet? Some parts are a little hotter and colder, and then it shifts the winds, and then the winds moved Antarctica to be the hottest day ever, and then moved the north to be a little colder and, you know, shitty, devastating weather. I don't know. But something happened. Something clearly happened. Because I don't know what happened. I know that we can consciously observe what happened and come to our own conclusions, but unless you have all the facts, it's kind of hard to do so. So I'm throwing a few out there. Is it just climate change? Is it just climate change? Dude, it's just the weather, man. Or is it more or less by actually intention? People who want to change the weather intend on changing the weather, and they do so through geoengineering. Is that a possibility? It sure damn is a possibility. Do I know what that the answer, the real outcome was? No, I don't. Could it be a mix of the both? It very well could be. So, climate change is not something that you should worry about, unless they are intentionally changing the weather. If there's conscious minds behind changing the weather, then you should be worried. They say that, like Al Gore and all those funny weirdos that come up with global warming, when they switched their story to climate change, they still kept the whole CO2's causing it bullshit. Well, let me explain to you what CO2 is. CO2 is a compound that actually is essential for plant life. In fact, it's essential for all forms of life, but I'm saying specifically plant life. They breathe in the CO2. It's actually good. It's almost like nutrients for them, for the plants and trees and you name it. So, let's say what causes CO2 emissions? Well, of course, diesel truck. I'm driving a semi right now. My semi specifically has cleaner fuel, it has a DEF system, which cleans the air, or cleans the gases and stuff. It filters out everything before it gets released. So it's that of a regular truck. Probably even better, because it clears out all that black smog and the CO2. But diesel trucks, CO2 emissions, cars, CO2 emissions. When you're looking at factories and stuff, they're releasing a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere. There's plenty of ways that we release CO2. But there's one that trumps them all. And when I heard about this, and I had to do extensive research on it, because I had to know if not only is it valid, but are the numbers right. Started doing my research on this when I heard it. By like 100 times over, more than any truck, car, factory, no matter what, all of those combined aren't even coming anywhere near the amount of CO2 that's released by livestock. You heard me? Livestock. Do your research. Cows, specifically, cows, cattle, they release a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere. A lot of it. More than any other being on this planet. Because there's so many of them, specifically. There's a lot of cows, because you guys like to eat your beef and drink your milk, right? Ugh. So, all these cows and livestock that's emitting all these CO2 gases, we're not going to get rid of that, are we? No, because there's no way you're going to become vegetarian. You eat beef because that's what your granddaddy did, and that's what his daddy did. But you can stop all that CO2 in the air if you're worried about the CO2, which I just explained to you, it's very healthy for plants and stuff. If you want to get rid of CO2 emissions, stop eating beef. That'll do more on the environment than downgrading your vehicle into a Prius, okay? They'll be doing 100,000 times better. If you became vegetarian or vegan, or, of course I preach a lot about veganism, but there's too much validity to it. If you want to stop CO2 emissions, stop eating cattle, stop going to fast food, stop eating meat in general. That will stop all the bad CO2 in the atmosphere. So, I just wanted to label a few things out for you. Now, of course, I'm not going deep into this video. I'm just outlining possibilities, thoughts. This is the mind of Opex. This isn't the mind of moron. So here we go, man. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you got something out of it, because it isn't just mainstream garbage that you're feeding. Yes, I believe in it now because I saw it on TV, and those people would never lie to me, right? Fucking sheeple. Get on my level. Opex here. Stay happy, stay healthy. See ya. Peace.